This is analysis of a 1 week ROMIP program, just going through some of the reasoning, the strategy, and the science behind the programming. So you can see here, PM Part A, this is a complete relative stamina session. And basically we're going upper body pressing into upper body pulling, into pressing, into pulling, and then to lower body, and finally into a combination of upper body pulling and pushing. So the reasons behind this, there are a few things. Firstly, this is a really good strategy piece. A lot of the time you will be required to do high reps of these movements. So really good to be able to strategize how to pace high rep body weight movements. Secondly, from a physical point of view, so aside from the strategy, from a physical point of view, basically building stamina here with very low load for high reps, it does create some changes within the muscle itself. It increases things like mitochondrial density, which helps the body to be able to generate more work, more fuel, more energy. So a key element there in actually changing the physiology of the muscles to be able to get some benefit there. The alternating between upper body pushing and pulling allows us to shunt blood between the two different areas, so it does make it a little cardiovascular, although the limiting factor and therefore the thing that's being improved here will be your localized muscular stamina. When you then go into the jump lunges, you're basically shunting all that blood from the upper body to the lower body, which in the sport of CrossFit is very useful, very important in programming. And then, of course, onto the muscle ups where you're shunting it back to the upper body. Part B here, with this athlete, we've identified the ability to aggressively pull from the ground, so that posterior chain power as a weakness. So you can see here we've got 2x2 snatch, pull, power snatch. The idea here, you do the snatch pull, and then using the same movement patterns as that sort of echo or shadow of that movement is still bouncing around the nervous system, you then go into the power snatch. The idea being the position at the end of that second pull should be identical in both the snatch pull and the power snatch. As heavy as possible, but perfect movements. And then 2x1, 3 position, snatch, pull, power snatch. Again, same sort of idea. So you'll go power position, snatch, pull, power position, power snatch, looking for an identical finishing position in both. At the end of the second pull, and then same thing from top and knee, same thing from the ground, and then we repeat that for the clean as well. On to Tuesday here, starting with Olympic lifting. Again, this athlete is biased towards Olympic lifting as a weakness. Part A, the warm-up here. This is a warm-up that's pretty standard across most of our athletes that we employ. 3x3 position snatch pull, just to get you working on finishing the pull there. 3x3 position power snatch to work on finishing the pull and turning that bar over. And then 4 position snatch. So tall snatch, snatch from power position, snatch from top and knee, and snatch from ground. The idea here being that each element of this drill builds on the previous. Then the same thing for cleans. And then for jerks, jerk dip, jerk, tall jerk, jerk. So basically you do a jerk dip, which encourages you to finish that drive. Then a jerk using that finish of the drive, again, using that echo that's going on in the nervous system. Then lowering to your forehead and doing a tall jerk to encourage speed under the bar. And then doing a full jerk again to both use the finishing of the drive from the jerk dip and the punch under the bar from the tall jerk. Then 5x2 snatch, 5x2 clean, 5x2 jerk. You'd be wanting to do a set every 3 minutes or so, at least a 2.5 minute break between rounds here. Should be heavy, should be weights that you would not be able to complete for 3, but not technical failure. So you should be moving well with these. Same weight across each set. And then 14 minutes, as many rounds as possible. 12 butterfly pull-ups, 12 kettlebell single arm push press, 18 broad jumps. A pretty typical shunting of blood here. So you can see very different movements, very little overlap. So the pull-ups is obviously very much an upper body pulling dominant movement. The push press is pressing dominant. The broad jumps are a little bit more explosive through the lower body. So very little impact between the 3 here, which means the onus will be on cardiorespiratory endurance. Not enough reps of each movement for that to become a limiting factor. Specifying here for this athlete that we are looking for butterfly pull-ups. So there's a little bit of a skill element in there too. The single arm push press on the kettlebell here, just to build overhead stability. So doing single arm work, unilateral work, will drastically improve your barbell work. The same can't necessarily be said in reverse. So there's a bit more bang for your buck in terms of the broadness of the adaptation when you put in some single arm, single leg, unilateral, unbalanced work. It doesn't build strength as much per se, but it can build your expression of strength a little better. On to Wednesday now, 5x5 bar dips and strict chest to bar pull-ups. Basically alternating here. So on 0 minutes, you do the dips. On 2 minutes, you do the pull-ups, etc. for 5 rounds in total. We do this alternation because there's not too much of an overlap in muscle groups here. There is a little bit in terms of your stability, but they are quite different. So purely we alternate them to be able to get as much rest as possible. So let's say your 5 reps is taking you 20 seconds. You've then got a good 3 minutes and 40 seconds before you do that same movement again. So in terms of strength development and hypertrophy, that's very effective. But we also want this to be time efficient. We don't just want to be doing your bar dips, then your pull-ups. It takes an extra 10 minutes to get through the session, and we know that we have multiple elements of fitness to train. Part B on the Wednesday, this is a high-intensity interval cardiovascular-based session. 3 movements, ball slams. Now, ball slams are primarily an aggressive flexion of the trunk type movement, so the intent here needs to be to slam it fast. So very much a flexion of the trunk. The box jump over is an extension of the hip, so you can see the opposite muscle group, and the shuttle run is obviously not as muscular, but very cardiovascular. So very small numbers of each movement here, so small that there's no excuse, obviously, to be breaking anything or even slowing down with any movement here. In terms of the time domains, 3 sets of 30 on, 120 off. Plenty of rest here. This is working very high intensity for a short amount of time, and you should be pretty much anaerobic here. So you should be able to sprint that 30 seconds, and you almost don't feel like you're working hard. There's a bit of a lag. You almost don't feel like you're working or breathing too hard until that 30 finishes. Then you realize how hard you've pushed it. 120-second rest, should be an active recovery, so just keep moving there. Same thing then, 3 times 120 to 240. We're now starting to get from anaerobic into more aerobic stuff, so obviously the intensity is having to drop a little bit. 4-minute break, so plenty of recovery. Again, because your body's now starting to produce some of these hydrogen ions, you definitely do want to keep moving in your rest interval here. And then 300 seconds to finish. Again, pushing the time domain a little higher. The advice on these in terms of pacing would be find the maximum sustainable pace and hold that. So what is the fastest you can maintain for 30 seconds, which will obviously be higher than the fastest you can maintain for 120, which will be higher than the fastest you can maintain for 30. If you do that, then you're guaranteed that you're getting the intent of the session. Friday, heavy barbell metcon here for part A, 8-6-4 2-minute AMRAPs with a 2-to-1 work to rest ratio. We've got a deadlift and a hang, squat, clean and jerk. Now in all these heavy barbell metcon sessions, one of the criteria that I set when I program these is that you're working some sort of posterior chain dominant movement, some anterior chain dominant movement, a pull and a push dominant movement. So we can tick the box for posterior chain dominant with the deadlift and anterior chain, pull and press dominant on the hang, squat, clean and jerk. 8-minute work, 4-minute rest, 6-minute work, 3-minute rest, etc. So the idea here being is that we can get multiple peaks of intensity. So you can always get a little bit more intensity at the end of a work interval. So for example, imagine you're doing a 10-minute AMRAP, the final minute and a half of that, you can really push the pace. You can go into a more aggressive energy system because then it doesn't matter if you hit the wall because you've almost finished. So looking for that peak where we dip into that anaerobic energy system at the end of the 8, the 6, the 4, and of course for as much of the 2 minutes as possible. Part B then is a rowing interval session. So again, for this athlete, we've identified rowing intervals as a weakness, or rowing as a weakness rather. Which sort of correlates with the weakness we've identified in that posterior chain power, which we saw earlier in the week with the snatches and cleans, pulls and power versions from various positions. So obviously similar movement type here, even though the energy systems are very different. 4x15 second work, 180-second passive rest. Now, obviously, extremely high intensity here. This is about power production, not cardiorespiratory endurance, sitting in the phosphocreatine energy system. So you need that 180 seconds to help to replenish the phosphocreatine levels in the body to be able to fuel that high intensity. And then 30-second work, 120-second active rowing recovery. Now, because we're starting to generate some of this acid in the blood, we need that active recovery as opposed to the passive rest for the 15-second intervals. And then into 2 rounds of 3-minute work, 6-minute rest, finishing with a 10-minute work. Again, you can see we're attacking different energy systems here. And this definitely does work best doing it from short to long instead of long to short. Finishing off here on the Sunday, we've got an Olympic lifting session to start it off. Part A, we've already discussed and the reasons and motives behind that. Part B, we're now looking at a little bit of barbell cycling, but it's heavy barbell cycling. So the technique should be good. There's definitely a difference in technique between a single very heavy lift and multiple reps at a light or moderate weight. For example, if you're doing power snatches, the set position will be very different. If you're cycling with a light to moderate weight, the hips will be a little bit higher, although the back will still be neutral. You won't be using your legs as much. And of course, that is not good technique for a heavy single. Just like sprint technique and running will be different to sprint technique for endurance running. It doesn't mean you're doing it incorrectly. It's just a different movement, a different sport, if you will. So this is a touch and go snatch. So 4 attempts in 10 minutes to find a 3-rep max touch and go snatch, then the same for a power clean, and then the same for a jerk. You'll notice in a lot of the Olympic lifting work, if one movement is a squat, the other will be power. So we're working multiple elements there as well. That ability to go touch and go here really forces a lot of tension through the body at that start position, which does transfer quite well into singles. And then on to a longer multimodal piece, really working on pacing in this one. So 9-6, 300 meter ski, 240, 160, 80 double unders, 75, 50, 25 wall ball. And what is key here is at the end of the 75 wall ball, hit the lap timer on your phone and then hit it again at the end of the session. And what you should find is that the first piece, the 900, 240, 75, is slower than the second piece. So in a perfect world, the second piece, so from the 600 meter ski to the end of the 25 wall ball, that should be a second faster than the first piece. That would be perfect pacing, where you're just being able to negative split it. So this asks for a lot of self-awareness in terms of what your body and your mind are capable of. The closer you can get those, the better you're getting with your pacing. All right, I hope this has been of use. If you have any questions on any of the science we've covered in this, you can email me on dan@rangeofmotion.net.au.